Hello, welcome to another update today. Today was a pretty low productivity day. I was mainly working on this new timer um, that was intended to be frame perfect, and really that's kind of it. If you heard from my yesterday's update, I was having problems with delays, and because the delays would, there's actually a few problems with the delays. That are inherent in Unreal Engine itself. First is that if you set the delay to 0, it will often delay still by 1 frame. And the other is that it's just not very frame perfect. And especially in fighting games where your frame data is very important, I want all my timers and things like that to be going on off exactly on the frame. So there were things happening like because 1/60th of a frame rounds to like 0.1167 seconds, right? It rounds up even though it's supposed to be 0.0016 repeating. The recovery gets, or that becomes a 2 frame delay instead of a 1 frame one, um, which is really not good. And because that's used everywhere in my blueprint, this means that your attack data isn't very consistent, or sometimes you would just get an extra frame here and there, or you lose an extra frame here and there, which is really not good. So this new system is supposed to bypass that. I tried to make a system that can basically just count the number of frames instead of doing time. Um, Basically, time sucks because I can't. Right, there's rounding errors and there's some other errors. I'm not exactly sure what the other errors are. Um, but yeah, anyway, so I have this time um, this frame is supposed to be like frame perfect timing system now. Basically what happens is that I'm able to set a timer. So I have a map of I have a map of timer IDs to the remaining time. So each timer is now represented by a single integer, and then the timer is also associated with the function ID. So the function ID is set up here. Let's see if I can find it. Right. So function ID is here. So basically, when you set a timer, if I can find an example in the damage system graph that I set up, if you set a timer, so there's a retriggerable timer. You set the number of frames you want to pause by, and then you set your function ID, which is the function. In this case, it's going to be the function right next to it, which is damage and hit freeze. And then it will assign itself a unique timer ID that it actually goes linearly from like 1 to max and goes back to, it just wraps around constantly. And so each one gets a unique ID, and then this way this is retriggerable because I am able to get the timer ID and then check whether, so when I'm setting this timer, I can check whether this timer ID already exists and actually reset that rather than setting a whole new timer in the timer framework. Let's see. So each frame now, each timer ID is associated with the time remaining in this map here, as I talked about. And then each frame, I'm going to decrement the timers so that so if it's pausing for 10 frames, it will decrement, it go down 9, 8, 7 each frame, and then when it hits 0, basically resolves it, and it calls the function, right? It calls the function in the function map. And that's just basically how it works. These strings here are kind of error checkers to make sure that when I'm removing the timer, or when I'm removing the function from the function map, so the function map actually associates a timer ID with timer ID with a function ID, and you can see the function ID corresponding to the actual functions in the function map I showed you earlier. In the function map function here, it's a mouthful. Let's think about it. Right, here. Yeah, so if my function ID is 1 on my timer, then it will hit this 1 over here. So that's what it does currently. You are able to set multiple timers, so it iterates through each loop. So each frame, it iterates through all the different timers in my timer, or in my map, and it decrements all of them and resolves all of them. and I think this ends up giving me something that's that's really good. So let's see if I can show you, right? So this is exactly 9 frames of advantage, and you can calculate that from the event graph here. This is really a mess. Right, so it's 9 frames of 9 frames of freeze, and then you get 1 frame, and then you get 10 frames of hit stun, I think. Yeah, you get 10 frames of hit stun. So it works out perfectly. The real problem here is that I need to be, so I'm setting and resetting every timer. And I think I've actually give this a little bit more thought, where this multi-timer setup, while it's flexible, it's not really necessary, I think. I hit down all the cases, and I think I can, basically, you end up only needing a single timer most of the time, right? Unless I am spawning, right? It would be a lot easier to spawn things like my guard box or herb box, because they can operate separately on each of these execution threads. But if I put them linearly, then I only really need 1 timer to take care of everything for me. And then it will make things like resetting timers, or like when timer collides with each other, right? I can very explicitly say what's going to happen in each of those instances. But the other thing that's really bothering me is that I can't, it's this function map here that really bothers me. Like, I had to link each of these functions up with an integer manually, and I can't pass the functionality using function pointers, or I can't assign like delegates, basically. Like, so I have a custom event here. I was testing things out, but I can't assign this to a variable. Right. So if I can promote this to a variable, I can then call this generic function, which is really what I what I want. Then I can, right, in this timer here, I can just set pass this into my timer, and then it will know what the function is to call without this whole map here. That's gonna get messy real quick. So I'm not exactly sure what I want to do yet. I think this system is a little bit too complicated and not useful in many of the cases. And I think because of that, even so, I verified the idea that my frame perfect timer works, but I think this system is a little bit too complicated for what I want. So what I'm thinking about implementing next is just a single timer with different like timer states, so that I can switch between right. So I was saying, this map sucks, and I think I can do a very similar thing with timer states, and it will be similar complexity without the whole junk about having multiple timers, and I can simplify a lot of this code. It'll be more efficient too when I'm running it, and just a clearer, just like more simpler logic for the system. Yeah, it just really irks me that I can't pass function pointers around. I might have to do something in C++, but it seems like it's unlikely because it just doesn't, right? Like C++ and Blueprint doesn't really mix very well. Like it seems like that from the initial Google search that I've done. So we'll see about that, and yeah, hopefully I'll have. So currently everything is still kind of broken, just because I'm in the middle of re-implementing this timer. So hopefully I'll back to something working and something that's frame exact next time you see this. But we'll see. All right, so thanks for tuning in, and yeah, happy Friday.